Move on to item 6.2 or 9:06 a.m. Item, presentation of Big Valley Groundwater Basin Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA process, and B, call to action for review, input, recommendation, and approval of the proposed sustainable management criteria, SMCs, for the draft Big Valley GSP as recommended by the Big Valley GSP Advisory Committee, GSPAC. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to, I think it's Marina, right?
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and take that, Mr. Vice Chair. This is Scott DeLeon, Public Works and Water Resources Director. My role here this morning is to introduce our two consultants, Eddie Teasdale and Christy Clark, with the consulting firm Ludorf and Scalmanini. And they're going to give you a presentation on the progress that's been made so far on the development of the Big Valley Groundwater Basin GSP. During their presentation, they're going to give you some sustainable management criteria, or SMCs. Ultimately, today, what we're asking your board to do is to consider and vote on recommending the inclusion of those SMCs. And I'm sure that Mr. Teasdale will have additional information for you if you have any questions on that. So with that, I will turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Can I get a thumbs up if folks can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. So I'm just going to jump right in here and just give a quick outline. Two things I want to cover today is give you an overview of the groundwater sustainability plan. Your GSPAC in the county has been really working hard the last couple of months. A couple of items I wanted to update you on there. And then, as Scott mentioned, the sustainable management criteria, which really are the key sort of fundamental pieces that we need some direction on from you all as we move this process forward. Again, just to refresh everybody's remind everybody, I guess there's a timeline in the upper right-hand corner. So, we're obviously in 2021. We're wrapping up our plan now, hoping to get that done here in the next 15 to 20 days. And then that plan needs to be submitted to DWR in January 2022. And then, of course, the goal is for some basins to sort of maintain or achieve sustainability by 2042. I think we can all recognize that for the most part, the Big Valley Basin is in very good shape already. So I think some of us think we're already in that system. We've already achieved sustainability, but we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. So again, a recap on sustainability plans. What are they? There's a lot of details that kind of go into these plans, but really there's four key components. The first one is we need to describe the basin conditions. So, how big is the bathtub supposed to speak? Who's using water? Where is it being used? What are the entities that are in the basin? And then we kind of move into the next item, which is defining basin sustainability. So there's some specific criteria that DWR has given us that we have to manage towards. And those are the sustainable management criteria that we'll talk about here in about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then another item that comes out of these plans is sort of developing projects and management actions. So in some cases, in some basins, if they're not sustainable, there's certain projects and or management actions that have to be implemented to become sustainable. So again, we've addressed some projects and management actions in the plan. We're not requiring any of those to be addressed, but if there's resources available, i.e. through grants, we want to capitalize on those. So those are included in the plan. And then really the fourth item is we have to develop the plan, which we're working on, and then adopt it by January 31st, 2022. So that's a quick recap of the main components that go into the plan. Moving on to slide 4, there's some guidance documents that DWR has provided, and that's sort of a screen capture is on the right-hand side of your screen there. And then on the left-hand side, what we've done is we've provided sort of a general table of contents for all the information that's going to be included into that plan. So you can see we've got, an introduction, and we've got various sections that, again, are required that come out of the GSP annotated outline. And then the items that are highlighted in red are items that we're already finished with. They're completed. They're out for a review now. The items that are sort of in black are being worked on. And again, our plan is to wrap all of this up in the next 2 weeks. So again, that just gives you an overview of kind of what's in the plan, the specific content. Now I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the sort of things that we've been working on with the GSPAC and the public over the last couple of months. The next item has to do with the Big Valley Hydrologic model. And so this is a tool that we've developed really for a couple of reasons, but one is it helps us define the water budget. So again, as part of Sigma, we have to develop 3 water budgets. So we have to develop a historical water budget, a current water budget, and a future water budget. So this model that we've been developed or has been developed really helps us to sort of better understand, land use changes, where's water being used, who's pumping water, how's water being recharged. That's, one of the key components that come out of the model. So we've been working kind of, with the GSPAC and our technical team to work through that. We've completed the historical and current water budgets. And then now we're working on the future water budgets. So again, these future water budgets, again, this is being required by DWR. We're not kind of doing this out of the goodness of our hearts. So we have to make some assumptions on, hey, how is land use going to change in the future? How is climate change going to be incorporated into sort of our modeling and affect our water budget? So this is the kind of the tool that comes, this is the benefit of this tool with the model. It helps us to sort of define these water budgets. So that's just a quick update on where we're at with the model. GSP implementation and funding is going to cost resources. So fortunately, the county has been able to capitalize on some grants that really have been paying for the development of the groundwater sustainability plan. But once the plan gets turned in, then it's back onto the county to figure out how do we develop a revenue stream to help move the GSP through sort of, implementation and actually out into 2042. So these plans, the cost structure, the schedule, that's going to be included in Section 6 of the GSP. But I just wanted to kind of share with you some of the costs that are going to be required. So there's going to be a GSA administration cost. There's monitoring and data management that has to occur. There's obviously stakeholder outreach. We all recognize the importance of doing that. And then also GSP implementations and updates. So there's certain requirements that DWR has, annual reports, 5-year updates that have to be funded. So again, we're working sort of with Scott and his team to try to figure out how do we sort of develop a revenue stream. And again, this will all be run through the GSPAC before we make any decisions and presented to you all. I guess one other thing is we really want to make sure that we have grants available or we can capitalize on grants when they are available. So that's really important. And then I've just clipped a text from the Sigma legislation that does allow the GSA to actually impose fees if needed. So I just wanted to share that with the group. And again, there'll be more details on this as we kind of move through the process. GSP schedule. We started in May, really, and we've been meeting with the GSPAC at least monthly, sometimes twice a month. You can kind of see we've identified mid-November to get a public draft out to the GSP to the public of the GSP, and then it'll be a 21-day public notice, and then that gives the public a chance to provide additional comments. As you all are probably aware, we've been releasing sections as we've finishing them up as they've been completed, so that the public has had the opportunity to provide comments if needed. And some have. It's been really, really helpful. But again, we'll get the public draft out, complete draft out in November, and then that gives folks about 3 weeks to review that, and then we'll bring it back to the board in January for adoption. And again, the GSP is due to DWR at the end of January 2022. Again, I want to clarify for the public that there's not only the public draft that's available to provide comments on. Once it's submitted to DWR, there's 75 days that are allowed for the public to provide additional comments. So after the GSP has been submitted in January 2022, there's an additional 75 days that will be available for the public to provide comments directly to DWR. So that's sort of an update on where we've been with the GSP development. Now I really wanted to dive into the sustainable management criteria. So this is really the key sort of fundamental piece for the groundwater sustainability plan. So again, to define sustainable management, what DWR has sort of developed is sort of some metrics. So we've got the sustainable management criteria, and then we have these measurable objectives, minimum thresholds, and interim milestones that we have to define for each one of our monitoring networks. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then we get to define what is considered an undesirable result. So again, this is again been required by us. So we have to develop MOs, MTs, interim milestones that actually go back and focus or get wrapped up into an undesirable result. And again, we get to define what the undesirable result is. And this will probably make a little more sense when I kind of walk you through sort of what we're proposing for MOs, MTs for our monitoring, for our various SMCs. So if you kind of think of MOs and MTs, MO is the ideal condition. MT is what we want to avoid. So some folks don't like it, but imagine your weight. You go to your doctor says, hey, Eddie, you should be 200 pounds or 205. Okay, my MO is 200, my MT probably 205. You don't want to hit 205 too often. So that's just an analogy that some folks like, some don't. So I apologize if I offended you. So let's talk about the sustainability indicators. So there's 6 of them. Again, this has been given to us by DWR. And I'll read them across the sort of the top of your screen here. So you've got the sustainability indicator. So the first one is lowering of groundwater levels. The second one is reduction of storage. The third one is seawater intrusion. The fourth one is degraded quality of water. The fifth one is land subsidence. And then the sixth one is surface water depletion. I think we can all recognize that we're far enough away from the ocean that seawater intrusion is really not an SMC we have to deal with here in Big Valley. And now let's talk a little bit quickly about the metrics. So the metric for lowering of groundwater levels is groundwater elevation, right? So we know we've got lots of wells within the Big Valley area. So we watch those water levels and they're going to fluctuate seasonally, but we have to define MOs and MTs for water levels. Reduction in storage, it's kind of similar to water levels, right? We want to make sure that we're kind of keeping the storage in the aquifer sustainable. So if we can keep water levels sustainable, generally we're not having a huge impact in the reduction in storage. So in a lot of cases, the SMC for reduction in storage, we use groundwater elevations as a proxy. Degraded water quality, we're going to utilize a monitoring network, and we're going to collect water quality data from those wells. And we'll utilize a total dissolved solids as a proxy for sort of understanding the health of the water quality, groundwater quality. Land subsidence, again, it's not an issue in this basin. Some of the basins in Southern California have big issues. So again, all these metrics are in relation to groundwater extraction. So if we're extracting groundwater that's resulting in subsidence, we've got an issue. We're not seeing that in Big Valley, but we recognize it's important, so we want to monitor it. And then the surface water depletion SMC, that's sort of a volume of rate where we're looking at, water, if groundwater is pumped near a creek, near a stream, if it's having a negative impact on surface water, we have to set up an MO and MT for that specific SMC as well. So I'm going to move to slide 10 briefly, and this is the monitoring network. So remember, for these SMCs, what we have to do is we have to develop a representative monitoring site. And then at that site, and generally it's a well, we set an MO and an MT. So we've got 2 networks, sort of monitoring networks in the county. We've got a broad monitoring network, 50-something wells. That's going to continue. That's what William and his folks have been working on the last couple of years. That's going to continue. But then we've got a subset of the broad monitoring network, which we're going to represent what we're calling as a representative monitoring network, or the representative monitoring sites. These are the RMS wells that we're going to utilize to set the SMCs. Okay. And in some cases, we have different wells that represent different SMCs. So as an example, recognize the importance of water quality. We've added a couple of wells that maybe are not included in the water level SMC or the RMS network. And then also for the surface water depletion SMCs, we've tried to select monitoring wells that are closer to surface water, right? If we're trying to monitor the impacts of pumping near surface waters, we want to monitor wells that are closer to the creek. So there's a bit of a shift in the RMS network, but generally there's 6 to 7 wells for each one of the SMCs. So, we've worked with the GSPAC. I think we started our initial meetings on the SMC factor or SMC task probably back in early August. And I think we counted with the meetings we've had with the GSPAC, and then we've also had meetings with individual GSPAC members because they all represent different stakeholders, have different concerns. I think we've had about over 20 meetings over the last couple of months to talk about specifically SMCs. So recognizing, that everybody has different interests, what we decided to do, and this is Christy Clark with Stantec was sort of instrumental in sort of setting this up, is what we did. We had a sort of a ranking system, and I've sort of illustrated that on the right-hand side of the of your screen here, where we have a ranking system from 1 to 6. And 1 would be a vote where the GSPAC fully endorsed the MO, MT, SMC, and 6 would outright reject it. And so again, if we had folks, and we had some that were sort of on the 5 and 6 range, what the question was, how do we get them back down, ideally below 4? That's what we're looking at. So when you kind of look at the sort of the distribution of the GSPAC members, 10 members, I think most of the votes came back in that 1 to 3 range. We did have some outliers, and we're kind of working through those now. But I just wanted to share that with you, that this is not being done within a vacuum. So last slide, I promise. This is the key slide. So what I've tried to do here is I've listed the sustainability indicators on the left-hand side of the column. So you can see sustainability indicator, and then we've got the 5 that are listed. We've got chronic lowering of groundwater elevations, reduction in storage, degraded water quality, land subsidence, seawater intrusion. I included it, but it's not applicable. And then we've got the depletion of interconnected surface waters. And then what we've done is we've sort of worked with the GSPAC, and we've identified MTs, MOs, and undesirable results for each one of the SMCs. I do want to note that when these plans are submitted to DWR, what we've been told is we're going to be sort of judged on the MT. So again, I mentioned the MO is the ideal condition. That's where we want to get to, but we're not going to be judged by DWR on that. We're getting judged by the MT. We want to avoid hitting that MT. So let me kind of walk you through these. I know it's a lot of information, but the chronic lowering of groundwater elevations, let's talk about the MT. So this is what we want to avoid. So this is going to be, the agreement has been, or the county's recommendation is, it's the lowest historical spring groundwater elevation plus an operational flexibility margin at each RMS for groundwater elevation. So that's the MT. Let's talk about the MO. The MO is the average historical spring groundwater elevation at each RMS for groundwater elevation. And then it's really important to understand the undesirable results. So what is considered undesirable? This is a local decision. What we're saying is considered undesirable is when 33% or 2 out of the 6 RMS wells fall below the MT for 2 consecutive years. So if that happens, there has to be a management action occur to bring that water level back up above the MT and ideally headed towards the MO. And then let me just kind of walk through these and I'll open it up for questions. Reduction in groundwater storage. I mentioned the sort of the bathtub analogy. So if we can keep water levels stable, then we're not seeing reductions in storage. So for the reduction in storage SMC, and again, we're required to set these, we're saying it's going to be the same SMC as groundwater levels. So the idea, again, the analogy is, if water levels are not changing, we're not seeing changes in storage. Degraded water quality. We're very fortunate in Big Valley. Water quality is extremely good. So what we're utilizing is total dissolved solids as a sort of a proxy for the overall health and water quality of the groundwater in the basin. So total dissolved solids of 750 milligrams per liter is the MT. The MO is 500 milligrams per liter. So that's sort of the MO is set at the secondary drinking water standard in California. And then recognize the importance again of water quality. We added an additional RMS well. And so in this case, we're saying when the undesirable result would be when 2 out of the 7 RMS wells exceed the MT for 2 consecutive years. So just to give folks a sort of an understanding right now, that the TDS, the average TDS, and we had just done some recent sampling with DWR, is around 350 milligrams per liter. So we're not even at we're in this case, we're well below the MO already. Land subsidence, the SMC for land subsidence, again, we're not seeing land subsidence in Big Valley, but we thought the GSPAC and the county recognized the importance to monitor for it. So we're utilizing satellite imagery. So essentially what we're saying with the MT is we're saying no more than 0.5 feet of subsidence over a 5-year period, which really is the margin of error in the equipment that's utilized to track subsidence. So essentially what we're saying is there's going to be no subsidence within Big Valley. The MT is just half of the MO is just half of the MT. The undesirable results very similar when we're saying there'll be an undesirable result if 2 out of the 6 RMS locations drop below the MT over a specific period. Seawater intrusion is not applicable, so we're not even going to, we'll mention it in the plan, but we're not going to set MOs and MTs for that. And then depletion of interconnected surface waters, it's sort of a similar concept as groundwater levels. We're sort of utilizing the lowest historical spring groundwater elevation plus an operational flexibility. The MO is sort of an average historical spring. So what we're trying to do is not make any changes. We're trying to keep things status quo. You know, right now the basin is actually quite healthy, so we just don't want to change that. And then the undesirable results in this case is very similar. When 2 of the 6 RMS wells would drop below the MT, that would be considered an undesirable result. And then there have to be a management action put in place to move that forward. So I appreciate your time. I know that was a lot of information. I'm happy to address questions. And then Scott, I guess I just hand it back to you and see where we go with this.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie. Yeah, great presentation, lots of information there. And board will be happy to answer any questions. Ultimately, these items right here are the SMCs are what we're asking your board's concurrence and approval of so that this can be taken back and can be incorporated into the final draft of the plan for the GSP.
Okay. Is there any questions from the board? Yes, there is. I see Jessica's got her. Go ahead.
So we're adopting the thresholds for the undesirable results, and then will we see the management plans if those thresholds are reached?
Yeah, I can address that. So in the plan, I think it's section 4 will detail the sustainable management criteria, and then section 5 talks about the projects and management actions that will be implemented if we hit the undesirable result. So the answer is yes, you'll see those in the plan itself.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other questions from the board?
Supervisor Sabatier has his.
I couldn't see.
Up.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier.
Can we take down the share screen, then you can see hands better?
Actually, I was going to use the share screen for the information because there's a lot of information. It's hard to remember it. My question is for the TDS of 500 milligram. We're looking at the water quality, the groundwater water quality in the area. I'm going to make some assumptions here, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I am pretty sure that certain people are using wells in order to bring potable water into their homes and that they're not all connected. Where does 500 milligram a liter per liter stand as far as water quality for the purpose of drinking water?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the answer is yes, they're obviously using groundwater and bringing it into their homes. So total dissolved solids is a secondary MCL that's set by the state. So this is a secondary MCL. Really, there's no health issues with drinking TDS of over 1,000. It's more the aesthetics, it's the taste, it's the color. There's no health impacts. You know, it's not like arsenic or boron. It's just it's sort of a general indicator of the health. And I think I mentioned previously we had William and his and company had we've reached out to DWR. DWR has gone out and had done some sampling in a couple of these wells, and we did see one that was over 1,000, but most on average the water level, the water quality specific to TDS is well below 500 milligrams per liter.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you spoke for a little bit about climate change and its impacts to the groundwater in the area. Obviously, that's something that happens when we have long-lasting droughts, as we are experiencing right now. I know that I'm hoping that some of this information could be brought over into the discussion that Supervisor Pyska and myself are having about drought management plan. Because I think it will help to better understand how to move around the county in similar situations and how to ensure that there's long-lasting groundwater and low impacts to the area and things like that. So I appreciate the data that you're providing and the research that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. No other questions? We'll go ahead and open it up for public input. Is there anybody in the Zoom room that would like to speak on this?
Not seeing any hands up.
All right, bring it
Mr.
back
Chair.
forward for action.
Mr. Vice Chair, sitting as the Board of Directors of the Lake County Watershed Protection District, acting as a Big Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, I consider and approve the proposed SMCs for the draft Big Valley GSP as recommended by the Big Valley GSP Advisory Committee.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Supervisor Scott, second by Supervisor Simon. Joanna, roll call, please.
Okay, Supervisor Simon,
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier. Supervisor Sabatier.
Aye.
Okay, Supervisor Scott,
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska,
Yes.
and Supervisor Crandall.
Aye. All right. Thank
Thank
you, Director De Leon and Mr. Teasdale. We appreciate your time and your presentation very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Excellent.